If you're anything like me, this past month has been highlighted by a lot of must-watch television. On Fridays, there was the cultural sensation that has been Apple TV's Severance, a show that deserves its own sermon at a later time. And then on Sunday evenings, many of my friends, and perhaps many of you, anxiously await the release of the newest episode of White Lotus on HBO's platform Max. Now, before I continue, I must say that White Lotus is not, I repeat, not for our younger friends here in the congregation. It is very much an adult show. So parents and guardians, consider this your advisory. The current season of White Lotus takes place in a luxury wellness resort and spa in scenic Thailand. And beyond its stunning vistas and villas, this resort is presented as a healing center, a place where people can rest, rejuvenate, and perhaps heal from whatever may ail them in their normal lives. That is, of course, if these people have the ability to afford such a place. And part of the colorful cast of characters in this season is an affluent family from Durham, North Carolina. They decided to visit Thailand at the request of one of their children, a senior in college who is studying Buddhism as part of her religion major. And then it turns out over the course of the show that her interest in Buddhism is not purely intellectual, but spiritual as well. And she reveals to her family that she would like to spend a year in a Buddhist meditation center following her graduation. Her parents are, let's say, skeptical of this decision, since it is an experience very much outside of the societal expectations of their community. And so they decide to go visit this center to make sure it will be a safe place for their daughter. When in the scene where her father sits down with the spiritual leader, the senior monk of this center, he wonders why his daughter would want to live there. And the monk's answer stuck out to me. And I quote, "Many young people come here from your country. I think because maybe there is a spiritual malaise, lost connection with nature, with family, lost connection with the spirit. So what is left? The self, identity, chasing money, pleasure, right? Everyone runs from pain toward the pleasure, but when they get there, they only find more pain. You cannot outrun pain." His diagnosis, that of a spiritual malaise in American culture, gave me pause. And I think there's a lot of truth to it. As a society, there is certainly a heavy emphasis on physical health, with the previous decades seeing the rise in a variety of diets, superfoods, and supplements meant to keep us healthier, younger, for longer. While, of course, this is very much important, I worry that it is too heavily grounded in our external lives, the emphasis on how we physically present ourselves and how others view us. But what, I would ask, what about our internal lives? Thankfully, those recent decades have also brought a newfound understanding of and sympathy for mental health. Ailments like anxiety, depression, PTSD, and others do not, by and large, carry the same stigma they once did. And this, too, is a great thing. No one should be made to suffer in silence for fear of how society may view them. And even more recently, studies have shown that the health of mind and the health of body are, in fact, linked. Perhaps the best summary of recent research can be found in Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, van der Kolk's 2015 book, The Body Keeps the Score, which lays out the many studies that have shown that trauma, while typically thought of as a mental ailment, in fact rewires the neurons in our brain and results in literal changes in our physiology. So in contrast to how much of modern society and our modern world had viewed the mind-body connection in the post-René Descartes era, our minds, bodies, and yes, even our hearts, our spirits, all exist within the same ecosystem. The interconnectedness between all these aspects of ourselves is what we might call our spiritual health. Now, for many people, notions like the soul or the spirit are, by definition, divorced from our physical beings. But this is not the case in Jewish tradition, where our bodies are seen as sacred vessels uniquely designed by a loving creator. And this fundamental assumption, infuses so many aspects of Jewish thought and ritual. For one, the most common Hebrew word for soul, neshama, is derived from the verb linshom, which means to breathe. Each morning, we have the opportunity in the morning blessings to offer gratitude for this spark of divinity, this soul within us. But to do so requires not just reciting words or thinking about a concept of the soul, but actually getting in touch with that physical, spiritual part of ourselves. You see in the second line of the blessing, and for those who would like to see for yourselves, you can turn to page 174 in your prayer books for the extra credit seekers among us. So in the second line of the blessing, we see a series of words ending with an ah sound. But it's not just any ah sound. It is one that is specifically emphasized in the Hebrew grammar with a hard H at the end. Ah, ah. And so it reads, Ata verata, ve'ata yetzarta, ve'ata nefachta bi. You created it, you shaped it, and you breathed it within me. And as my teacher, Rabbi Dr. Dahlia Marks, explains, this is an intentional literary technique to do what? To encourage us to breathe and to connect with our breath. The counterpart to this blessing offers gratitude to God for our physical bodies. In it we say, praise to you, Adonai, who formed the human body in wisdom, creating its many pathways. For it is well known that were any of them to fail, it would be impossible to live and stand before you. So for us as Jews, our bodies are not prisons of the soul or vehicles for sin, but instead an integral part of a sacred whole. While modern research into the mind-body connection might be new and groundbreaking, it is something that our tradition has known well for many centuries. We need not look further than the 12th century sage Maimonides, who was not only an extraordinary philosopher, scholar, theologian, but also a working physician. In his letter to a patient, this patient just so happened to be the ruler of Egypt at the time, he explains, it is known that the passions of the soul greatly alter the body in ways obvious to any observer. For this reason, physicians have recommended constant concern for and awareness about the soul's movements. Maimonides goes on to write much about what he refers to as the sickness of the soul, with symptoms like being overwhelmed by worry, having obsessive thoughts, or anyone who is only slightly cheerful about things that should make them very cheerful. Sound a little familiar to people? And his prescription for conditions like what he calls melancholia, what we would call depression, include things like walking in beautiful gardens, looking at beautiful objects, and my personal favorite, listening to music. Now, if we fast forward about 9 centuries or so, we find similar findings in van der Kolk's The Body Keeps the Score. One section discusses the experiences of survivors of the 9/11 terrorist attack in New York. Now, for the majority of folks who participated in this study, talk therapy, sitting down and talking with a therapist, was not really helpful in healing their trauma. They found that the most effective methods, at least at the beginning, to bring them to a place where they could confront what they had gone through were actually things like acupuncture, massage therapy, particularly amongst firefighters and first responders, yoga, free writing, art therapy, movement and meditation, rhythmic drumming, and so many other activities. So just as our souls are intimately connected with our physical selves, so too do our experiences of the world literally affect our physical bodies, and vice versa. The way that we can take care of our bodies can also affect our soul. Now, I just want to say, I hope that our wonderful healthcare professionals here in the congregation don't take what I'm saying as encouraging folks to seek alternative treatments for their ailments. It's actually quite the contrary. What I hope to leave you with this Shabbat is a reprioritization of our spiritual health, the health of our bodies, the health of our minds, and yes, the health of our souls as well, because all of them are interrelated. Harm to our souls leads to harm to our bodies. As former Surgeon General Dr. Vivek Murthy discusses in his book, Together, the health ramifications, specifically of loneliness, which he declares as an epidemic in our country, could be quantified as the same as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. People who are lonely, people who feel that their soul or their spirit is sick, end up being more physically sick. And so, on this Shabbat, where we celebrate the many wonderful people in our community who work tirelessly to keep us healthy, I hope that we can also remember the importance of our spiritual health and the dangers of the spiritual malaise described in that episode of White Lotus. May we find ways to feed our hearts and souls as well as our stomachs, seeking out those prescriptions that don't come in a bottle, but come in the form of connection, sacred relationships with one another, our connections with our natural world, spending time with those nearest and dearest to our hearts, and of course, perhaps most importantly, finding that connection, that deep spiritual safety and security within ourselves. May we acknowledge and internalize the idea that we too, not just everyone else, we too are made in the image of God. And may we find ways to prioritize our mental, physical, and spiritual health so that we can continue to be God's partners and do holy work in a world that sorely needs it. Ken yehi ratzon, may it be God's will. Ken yehi ratzonenu, so too may it be our will. And let us say it together. Amen.